Good afternoon to Miss Linway. I'm Anne-Marie. Today I'm going to talk about the impact of Covid-19 and the volatile Australian dollar on tourism. This is the historical of the impact of Covid-19 on tourism. The spread of Covid-19 has severely affected Australia's tourism industry and Australian economy. Australia began restricting entry from countries with a high incidence of Covid-19 cases in February 2020 and closed its border to all international tourists on 20 of March 2020. As a result, the industry is facing a sharp decline in all areas, with the most severe impact occurring in April 2020. The industry faced a shrinking tourism economy, and there will be a significant losses in the terms of international tourists, tourism expenditure, and employment. The economy in fact reflects the loss of direct tourism expenditure caused by the decline in the number of international tourists and the reduction in work due to the slowdown in tourism economy. The pandemic of Covid-19 has severely disrupted global and Australian tourism demand. The industry has experienced a sudden hit in international visitation. By March 2020, the number of tourists have fallen further and has been flat at a historical low from April 2020. These include event and aviation departments, travel agency, and cruise line. Furthermore, it also caused restrict domestic movement. Since the breakout of Covid-19, a sharp decline in the number of international tourists has a devastating impact on Australian companies that provide service to these tourists and lead to a sharp decline in the economic activity in the first half of this year. And the last is the impact of tourism jobs may lay off around 50% to 20%, and the net impact is estimated to reduce around 99,000 to 133,200 jobs, mainly part-time, temporary, and contract jobs, lost salary and wages into broader economy. That is the current state of affairs for Covid-19 on tourism. The Australian government announced a series of economic stimulus plans. This measure would be aviation. Regional Aviation Network Assistance provide $198 million to assist domestic commercial airlines. This will support critical aviation service that connect the Australian region with cargo, medical testing, supply, and necessary personnel. Furthermore, there is an export. Covid-19 Export Capital Fund, a $500 million fund to assist previously profitable Australian exporters whose business have been affected by the Covid-19. Exporters will be able to obtain loan ranging under this mechanism. Moreover, there is a public-private partnership, National Tourism Incident Communication Program, which is NTICP, the Australian Trade Commission, the Australian government agency responsible for tourism policy, launched the NTICP on 8th of January 2020 to respond and expand it to cover the Covid-19 crisis, and it will be waiver Federal National Park fee reduction from 16th of March to 31st of December 2020. The Australian government will waive the entry fee of national park up to maximum of $11.2 million Australian dollar. Once the travel restrictions are relaxed, free entry to the park will be provided to visitors with additional incentive to visit this iconic destination. Next, the impact of Covid-19 on tourism industry and country. The tourism industry in Australia have been hit hard by the pandemic. First, the impact of Covid-19 on aviation. The border closure and the sudden loss of consumer demand in 6 quarters of 2020 result in the 95% drop in the total number of domestic passengers. Domestic overnight travel, including air travel, fell from 24% to 6% in the June 2020 quarter. Australia's leading airline, Qantas and Virgin Atlantic, announced thousands of layoffs. Furthermore, there is the impact of accommodation industry. The number of overnight stays in the domestic capital city in the 6th quarter of 2020 have dropped by 78%. However, the remote area of tourists who rely on air travel are suddenly cut off from the traditional domestic market. The tourism industry faces challenges. Many short-term changes have taken place in Australia's tourism landscape. The average travel expenditure for the June 2020 quarter was only $385 per person compared to $648 per person in June 2019. The sudden closure of international borders have harmed many parts of industry that rely on international tourists. Due to the blockade, some parts of the industry almost completely lost tourism revenue. In the June 2020 quarter, visitor spending in many entertainment industry dropped significantly. These include meeting and conference expense, organized travel, entertainment, and so on. The flow of projects to transaction through the pipeline to slow down. The reason for this situation includes some projects under construction have suspended construction due to the lockdown and social distancing restriction or slowed down due to the limited material supply. Many hotels that are expected to open in 2020 but was postponed their opening dates. Regional development costs are lower than in capital city. This may cause future pipeline to have a lower value. There is the statistical information for impact of COVID-19 on tourism. The following figure 1 shows that the pandemic of COVID-19 has severely affected all aspects of Australia's tourism industry. Since February 2020, the number of international arrivals have fallen sharply down to 26%. The international arrival on March 2020 shows a further decrease of 60%. The result of this border closure is a rapid decline in the number of short-term tourists in February 2020. By March 2020, the number of tourists have fallen further and have been flat at historical low from April 2020. The sudden loss of international tourists is immediately felt, especially in some industries that are highly dependent on international tourism. These include aviation department. The government implementation of the travel ban in response to the COVID-19 has led to a decline in air passenger traffic in Australia starting in March 2020. According to the data, the number of passengers carried on Australia domestic commercial flight in April 2020 dropped by 93.6%. As of December 2020, domestic passenger traffic has still fallen by 54.9%, and the accommodation due to the border closure and travel restriction. The apparent threat affecting Australia hotel industry is the decline in international and interstate tourism. However, demand for Australia hotel service has generally declined, with occupancy rate falling below 60%. Moreover, it also impacts in travel agency. The government announced a travel ban on all Australia in March 2020. User and participation in all travel-related categories, including airline, resort, travel information, and online travel agency. The travel arrival rate in March 2020 decreased by 12% and 38% respectively. And it also improved tour operator. With the development of the situation, including the complexity of organization, travel agencies have reduced or ceased operation across administrative boundaries. There are some of the recommended course of action for government and other policymakers. Government have been taking unprecedented measures to respond to the crisis through overall economic stimulus plan. First, it will be tourist protection. Tourists beyond their usual environment often suffer from insufficient information, and the Australian government was taking measures to provide assistance and information in multiple languages and formats. Worker and business support. The tourism sector have benefited from cross-sectoral measures taken by the government to provide flexibility and relief to workers. Australia have concentrated on providing financial relief to tourism SMEs, such as postponing the payment of value-added tax. Non-financial support is also provided, including information provider and consulting service to comply with the new rule. And the last one will be destination support. Other key factors include the nature of travel due, the impact of travel restriction of tourist flow, the scale and complexity of business operation, the size of the domestic travel market, and the status of the tourism industry in the broader economy. A tailored response is usually required. Response measures are consistent and complementary to general economic stimulus plans such as support measures for small and medium-sized enterprise, which is SME. In Australia, the SME guarantee scheme will support small and medium enterprise, including self-employed individual and non-profit organizations with a turnover of less than 50 million Australian dollar in loan of up to 40 billion Australian dollar. Moreover, the government provides guarantee of up to 50% of new loan. The conditional lender will issue before 30th of September 2020. The Covid-19 Export Capital Fund is a 500 million Australian dollar fund to assist Australian exporters who were previously profitable and whose business was affected by the Covid-19. Exporters will obtain loan ranging from 250,000 Australian dollar to 50 million Australian dollar under the mechanism. Here is the reference list for the report. And this is the appendix of the report. Thank you.